AI happens pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, it might just pass you by.
Hello and welcome to The Reasoning Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely, and today I have reason to look at the calendar and realize it's the beginning of the month or the end of the previous month, and so it's time for AI News of the Month. We're going to get to that right after the break. Today's show is brought to you by VENTION. Is AI truly improving how your software gets built or just adding complexity? At VENTION, AI isn't an add-on. It's embedded into their software development lifecycle from architecture and coding through testing and release. Their engineers use it to cut friction, speed up progress, and raise quality at every stage. That's what they call the peace of mind promise. You focus on growing the product and winning your market while they handle the tech. Get software developers who build with you, not just for you, at VentionTeams.com. And we're back, and we are going to talk today about AI News of the Month, AI Trends of the Month, and joining us, as always, for now the sort of condensed version, since we don't have to really cover cloud that much. Brandon Whichard, welcome back. How you been? It's been a few minutes since we talked last time.
I've been fantastic. I'm surviving the March Madness by not doing a bracket, so I feel like I'm winning. I just flip it on and be like, oh, I would have predicted that upset. I pretend that I knew it was all going to happen all along, but I don't have anything on paper. How about you?
I had Florida winning the whole thing, and so they went out in like the first or second round, so my bracket's been busted for a while. But no, I don't think, my daughter goes to Tennessee, so I guess we still have a rooting interest in that one.
Yeah, go Vols. See what happens, right? The other UT got eliminated in heartbreaking fashion, so people in my part of the world, they're very sad. That's right. The University of Texas.
I have a small beef to pick with you. You guys you and Matt Ray did a show this week. I think it was about like field engineering and YOLOing some stuff, and you had Roof to Electric Boogaloo as a title that was just sitting there right in front of you, and you guys just missed that one.
I have to get on the editors. Sometimes we don't have our act together. So duly noted, we'll do better next time.
All right, man. Actually, I'm gonna do this. We said that we're gonna, as we flip to reasoning, we're gonna obviously be much more AI focused. There is one good cloud news story this week, so we might as well get to that first. Then we can dive in deep into the AI stuff. ARM, the company who up until now has always just been licensing their intellectual property for other people to manufacture chips, is now in the chips business. Another big chip company out there, somebody who doesn't necessarily have, deep sort of supply chain expertise, but obviously they're making the case that, basically I think that they did a big event. I was listening to Ben Thompson had recorded a whole bunch of it. And so I was listening to parts of that. Their argument was basically, today in data centers, at least in cloud data centers, it's like 30,000 CPUs like per gigawatt of power, and they're expecting that to jump to like 120,000. So like X the density they're expecting fairly soon. A lot of it driven by the tool calling and AI agents and stuff like this. Stuff that's not necessarily the GPUs obviously doing the neural network stuff, but everything that's like calling the GPUs, everything calling out to tools and stuff. So it's going to be very interesting. It would be between ARM now getting into sort of chip design and CPU manufacturing, and then NVIDIA, sort of quietly talking more and more about their own CPUs and how powerful those are. It feels like the tide is very much shifting from Intel and AMD over to ARM and NVIDIA being the kind of primary CPU providers for, maybe the next decade or so.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny if we go back in time, because, our friend Jensen Huang over at NVIDIA for the longest time was like, it's an accelerated computing world. No one needs a CPU. CPU is dead. Everything will move to the GPU or something along those lines. Then, flash forward, NVIDIA themselves are now making their own CPU, right? Because they're hey, we got to have one. And, I found the argument in the case for an ARM chip pretty compelling. I think it's pretty simple. I think it was sort of like people want, an ARM-based CPU. The only people that make them today are all proprietary companies, like before it was Facebook, right? And then now it's Graviton, as we've talked a lot about on Amazon. And then of course, Google has some of their own ARM chips. So it's sort of like, it kind of made sense. It's like, well, if the rest of the world wants one and you're not one of those like 3 to 5 biggest hyperscalers in the world who's just going to make their own, like why, if you're the ARM CEO, you're like, why not go ahead and make our own chips and and at least offer the world all these different chips and see what we can do. So it makes sense. And I also think it's a topic I think only covered on Software Defined Talk and actually only covered by me and Matt Ray. There's a very obscure I don't know how obscure it is, but like Hyper 5, or what is it? With the instruction set, I just forgot the name. Anyway, there's another instruction set out there, right? That is the open source version of ARM. So I wonder, Hyper-V or Hyper 5, however you want to call it, I wonder if this is like a little window into like, if people get tired of ARM, right? If they're sort of like, we don't even want to pay licensing fees, way in the distance, you have a Hyper-V out there waiting for another instruction set. And if you really mind the bowels of the internet, you'll find that Apple, for some of their non-important chips, they use that. They use that instruction set so they don't have to pay a license fee. So it's always kind of funny. It's like everything has like a consequence. It's like ARM's now in the CPU game, makes total sense, but you wonder, does this then open the door for like even more free instruction sets? So fun to watch. I think ARM's going to be fun to watch. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, if nothing else, I mean, just based on the number of sort of data center plan versus lack of power for stuff, it makes sense that the chipsets that are very low power are going to be taking up a lot of space. So.
And I think the other thing we kind of forget sometimes to mention this, but it's like all of this in the end is like it's kind of built on the foundation of your day job, right? Linux, it's like, because like, well, the operating system exists now and it's been running on ARM forever. It's like all that work, like, think about like, you just take that for granted, right? Yeah. It's like, it all just sits there. So they just throw another chip. Whereas you go back even 10 or 15 years, it was like, what's going to run this? It'd be experimental. But now it's just like, yeah, Linux runs on everything. And so it is like, we forget that, but it's like, that's the foundation reason of why ARM can come out. And there's like, yeah, there's a fully supported operating system ready to go for it. So perfect.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting stuff. There's also there's an interesting thing. We'll have to dig into it in one of these shows. I'll probably have to do a special show on it. But there is this sort of new architecture spinning up. People aren't talking about it a whole lot, but it's going on where like every single one of these, whether it's like just like a Claude instance or one of these agent instances, is getting sort of its own sandboxed sort of container running somewhere. So, there are literally like 100,000 and million node Kubernetes clusters being built up in the cloud for some of these things. So a lot of that stuff will end up being CPU based. So it makes.
And hey, let me just correct myself. I meant RISC-V, not Hyper-V. That's the Microsoft thing. RISC-V. I was having a hard time recalling what it was. Anyway, so don't email Brian it. That was my fault.
RISC-V, Hyper-V.
For the chip nerds out there, go check it out. RISC-V, whatever you want to call it.
That's
anyway,
right.
Moving on.
All right. Well, let's see where to dig in for stuff. Do we want to start with Claude, with Anthropic? Do we want to start with OpenAI? I guess we should start with NVIDIA. NVIDIA, obviously GTC, sort of the AWS reinvent of the AI world. I did some analysis on a show a couple of weeks ago. Did you have any big thoughts either coming out of the show or the keynote or any of the big announcements from GTC?
Yeah, well, we covered it as well. I don't want to rehash it too much. I think what you and Aaron said a lot. I think you guys gave a really good overview. I would just say very long. Keynote, way too long. That was my main thing. But I think the key thing, I just kind of distill it down to like, NVIDIA's killing it, right? They make the best token machines. Until further notice, they'll continue to make the best token machines. I do think, sometimes like, we have to be careful with the halo effect around Jensen Huang. I saw like another thing came out, like now he's up to 60 direct reports. And, so we just have to be careful that like people start applying the like, well, he has 60 reports and it's a $5 trillion company. It's like, they're just in a great place. And even if you watch that keynote, I don't think that was the world's greatest keynote, but honestly, it didn't need to be the world's greatest keynote. It was sort of like, we have the best chips, we have the best token machines, you need them, keep buying them. And he went on to say that they're going to potentially have I think $1 trillion in revenue. I guess he was talking next year. Like, I can't remember how he qualified it, but like, I guess again, like when you're winning, kind of back to like basketball, when you're winning, sometimes winning is enough, and let's not over-examine exactly what's going on there. So that was kind of my take on it.
Yeah. No, it felt like there was a lot of it was a lot of the same. It did feel like he was trying very hard, and he does every single time to basically be like, without saying it, the most important thing is I need my stock price to stay up because that gives me all the leverage to do all the things I do otherwise. So yeah, I mean his story is. God, I mean, I hate to keep saying this, and people that listen every once in a while are probably like, God, that guy's still talking about that 20-year-old Cisco story. But I mean, the parallels between the way John Chambers used to have to talk about, like, he literally used to have this tagline that was like, the internet will change the way we work, live, play, and something else. I mean, it was like everything will be the internet, and now we're just into the everything will be accelerated computing, which again, same sort of stuff. I thought the one NVIDIA story that wasn't announced in the keynote, but it was sort of uncovered in the filing was they're carving off like between like 25 and $30 billion to sort of build their own frontier model, which I think is pretty interesting given kind of how much insight. Now, they don't necessarily have like the data scientists per se, but they do have access to all of the GPU resources. They really want to sort of hold them back and stuff. So it does feel very much to me like, if you're drawing a picture of the AI market, on one hand, it's going to look a little bit like, have you ever seen that old diagram that it would sort of like lay out what the tech companies look like? And there was always one that was like Oracle, which was like 90% lawyers and then like 10% salespeople. I feel like there could be a diagram where it's like NVIDIA is sort of like the money funnel to like all of these people, and then it sort of loops back on them. And then at the same time, you'd overlap that with that sort of Spider-Man in a circle meme, except they'd all be pointing guns at each other because every single one of them wants to own their own model, but they also want to build their own hardware, but they don't trust each other to do the thing. It's,
Although I took it, that's the one thing I took to just sort of, I took him at his word around, and I think he said this in the interview again on Ben Thompson. I guess Ben Thompson's getting all the good big names, right?
Sure.
But I think he said something like, are you going to build basically like some type of software on top of it, some type of like ChatGPT? And he pretty much said point blank, and listen, when I say this, I'm not saying he can change his mind, but I'm just saying he said point blank, no, we're a systems company. Yeah. And I took him at his word around like, we need to build this so we understand how people are using this, right? And it's like the number you threw out, it's like, it's absurd to say this, but $20 or $30 billion to NVIDIA, not a lot of money. It's just like for them to kind of like use that to kind of like, we need to make the chips that know how to do this. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in-house and quote unquote experiencing it. And also if like somebody gets in a real bind and they want one, they have it. But I don't feel like I don't feel like that's going to be a big business for them. What do you think?
It's a weird number because it would be interesting to sort of go look at, we always see like, hey, OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever just raised this big round of funding. And it, felt for a while like every 8 or 9 months, they were raising another $100 billion. But what they don't ever break out is like, okay, well, how much of that $100 billion is going straight to hardware and how much of it's going to sort of like support software? I wouldn't be surprised if you sort of did some of the math or was able to break it out a little bit to where you were like, NVIDIA is making a similar, or at least in the same ballpark sort of, investment around the model that actually on the software side, the OpenAIs and the Anthropics and those kind of guys are doing. Now, it might be, an order of magnitude smaller, but I think the $26 billion number versus the number we keep seeing from the providers is skewed because theirs includes so much of it being hardware, right? Like hardware or building their own data centers or whatever it is. I think what's weird to me is people typically fundamentally think of NVIDIA as a hardware company. And then they go, oh, no, they're a software company because they have CUDA. But CUDA is kind of, I don't know what the right analogy of it is. I mean, it's almost like, I don't know, it's software, but it's not software, right? Like, I mean, it's like driver code, right? It's the equivalent of, and that's the wrong analogy, but like, I don't know the right way to sort of explain it because it's not fundamentally like application software. It's not middleware software. It's not anything that anybody has to look at and go like, what's the user experience? What is it? So they're great at building these libraries, but the other thing they're doing is, and this was the part that I thought he felt really uncomfortable saying, which was like, we are a vertical systems company. And you're like, yep. And you guys are world-class at that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then he'd be like, and we're an open software company. And you're sort of like, but I don't think you guys know how to be a software company, right? Like I think you know how to be a CUDA company. And again, I go back to this thing, like every hardware company at some point goes, oh, you know what I should do as a strategy? I should look at what the trends are in software, and I should go find a way to have a version of that software and give it away for free. Because if I give it away for free, then I'm destroying the market. I'm destroying the revenue above me, but I'm not preventing anybody from making stuff that could consume my hardware. And the problem with that, and again, I go back to the Cisco analogy, is forever Cisco was a hardware company. They reached a point where it was like, okay, software's starting to eat in what you did. I mean, we've seen this a million times, like Cisco and other hardware companies try and become software companies, Cisco, HP, others. And you're like, you're not good at software. Like doing software and doing hardware are just fundamentally different.
And they do lots of weird
things.
Acquisitions and,
well, and then especially if you're trying to do like quote unquote open software, like if you're doing software like Apple does, where it's just integrated, it's a stack, that's different. So I think they're doing the thing that they think they have to do, which is like, I got to hedge all sorts of bets. It's very hard to ever see somebody who's ever done proprietary vertical hardware and open software, and been sort of successful at both of them. So I don't know. That to me feels like the part where it's a lot of hedging. The good news is they have an insane amount of money to hedge.
Well, I do think I break them down. I think the foundation models, I kind of get behind a little bit. Makes more sense. NeoClaw, I was not behind. I was just like, I don't really, and I want you to have your friend and colleague Sally back on in a few months and be like, just explain to me what the difference between OpenClaw and NeoClaw, and are they using it? Is it being incorporated? Because that was where I think really plays into what you said before, was sort of like it doesn't feel like this thing next year at this time. I don't think we'll even talk about it. It'll just be completely gone. Happy to be wrong, but I want to, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think it's a way to get, I think it's their way of being like, I need inference. I need inference. I mean, cause the math on inference is so interesting at that point where you're just like, okay, agents are going to work 3 times as many hours a day as like a human being. And they're going to be some multiple of numbers of human beings. So I want to make sure that's as easy as possible. But yeah, why they need their own specialty version of it, I think that ultimately boils down to like, they want to have some hooks back into whether it's CUDA or whether it's their own model or whatever it is without, I don't know.
But to your point about inference, and maybe this reads just into something else you have here about, is it a bubble? It's like, I feel like, they have there's more than enough inference. Like, we won't talk about cloud code much this week because we already talked about it at length on the previous episode. But, I'm at a point where like, I know that at where I live, that the tokens get cheaper at 1 p.m. Like, I literally know that because I know that I have from like 1 o'clock on, I'm at half price tokens. And it's if they gave, because, Claude basically put something out that said like, because
I did see that. Yeah.
They basically said it's like, the morning hours for the US people, right? It's like, I guess that's when everyone's going to work. So I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, yeah, Claude is even, if we had more tokens, we would consume more tokens. So I always just feel like there's plenty of inference out there. Now, I don't know, that may be the problem is like, I don't, maybe the fundamental question to the bubble question is like, I don't know if what Claude is selling me is profitable to them. I don't know what the margin on a token is. I would think it is, but if it isn't, that's a big problem. But I just think to myself, it's like, no, man, everything's capacity constrained, right? Like everybody wants to be doing things more, and we would like to be like them to be cheaper. So if I'm Jensen, I'm not worried about that problem, at least this year. Now, maybe several years from now. So I don't know. That's just my impression of it. So, I don't know. So maybe that leads us to a question. Maybe we should just ask you, Brian. I'm sure you have the answer. So are we in a bubble?
Oh man, this was the month where all the opinions came flying out. I feel like if you are I don't know, if you are a full-time analyst, right? You're Ben Thompson, you're Slides Benedict, you're Paul Kudrowski. You did I feel like you have to be on you're either all in on the pro bubble or anti bubble kind of thing. I feel like the reality is like you have to be able to hold both those ideas in your head at the same time and sort of realize like it's probably somewhere in between. It's just a matter of like, because I think the scenario is like, you've got, as we've talked about, like at this point, nobody wants to get rid of this stuff. Nobody's like, it's fine. Like it's not the metaverse, it's not anything else. It's like, I really want this. And there is enough demand at this point that, again, they've sort of set the hook on people. Yeah, the math on some of this stuff also doesn't work, right? Whether it's the financing or there's not enough power or those sort of things. But it's like, those are market competitive things that the market has traditionally found ways to work their way through, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I feel like, there's a rational part of me that's like, well, it'd be nice if like my 401k didn't drop by 50% because I know the market is completely propped up by AI. That's sort of the downside thing of it. But on the other side, I'm like, I feel like I'm more pro. It's not a bubble. It's it's just it's just the stage that we're in. But I listened to all those sort of interviews this month, and I'm like, you guys all make great cases. I don't, I don't want to argue your case, but
it's like the last interview you listen to, you're like, I think that person was right. I feel the same way. Well, I think, maybe to your point about holding two things it's in your mind at once, it just comes down to, yes, it makes a lot of sense that we see this demand, we experience the productivity. So that makes us feel like maybe it's not a bubble, but then like we probably have trouble understanding like the infrastructure spend, like $80 billion from Amazon or whatever, right. 100 billion. And it's like human brains, like like those numbers are so big that we sort of like, we don't really comprehend. So like maybe it's like, even with the value that we're experiencing, you know, the amount of investment is just so large that it could just be very difficult. And I think that's the Paul argument. So I agree. I think it's very hard, but I'm going to continue to do my part and use a lot of Claude Code. So that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's robust enough that you're, as you predicted before, Anthropic's already talking about a Q4 IPO, which would be, you know, likely ahead of the OpenAI IPO. So, you know, they at least feel confident enough that, you know, they're going to be able to paint a story that it's not a bubble. There's lots of room to grow, and that they are, you know, whether they're going to be in the black or the red when they IPO is, you know, sort of TBD. Probably in the red, but they probably feel like they're showing a trajectory that's like, yeah, this will be an easy case to make.
I think they will. I think people want it, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Another interesting sort of thing that's coming out of this is, and again, this is the crazy thing about this market. I mean, we talk about this every 3 months. Like every 3 months, everybody sort of gets their moment in the sun, and then, you know, 3 months later, we're sort of digging the grave for them. Apple seems to sort of have come out of this, you know, and we'll still have to sort of see what's going on. But like Apple sort of came out is now at this point where they're like, I've literally almost spent none of my capital on this stuff, right? Everybody else has done all the build outs. They made a huge faux pas with the sort of early Apple Intelligence. It felt like they sort of righted the ship by, you know, adopting this, you know, $1 billion agreement with Google, which feels, you know, like nothing, and basically like sort of free. And now they've basically said, nope, you know what we're going to do? We're going to expand that out to, you know, support a whole bunch of different models, which on one hand, you're like, well, that's probably pretty smart, because it is very difficult to sort of, you know which one to pick, and people are still moving around and stuff. But it's hard to figure out if Apple is making sort of a, you know, they've waited, and their conservatism is sort of being rewarded, or if this is another announcement of like, they still really have no idea what the AI experience is going to be on the device that is the most profitable thing in the world. Right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the latter. I think they're just passengers like us. I think it's one of these things where it's like, you know, in this case, it's just luck or whatever you want to call it. It's like their inability to execute on a strategy has like left them with a strategy, right? So they basically decided like, we're going to partner because we've already proven we cannot build this for lots of reasons. Either we don't have the people, we're not willing to spend the money, probably a combination of both. So now we're at a point, and again, anyone that's using these things, it's like, yeah, it is just nice on your Mac or whatever. Just switch around, use the ones that you think are good, right? You know, so it's like make it really easy. And again, like I have all the apps on my phone, and like it make it really easy for me to just like use a different app. And if it wants, I mean, the thing they have to figure out is like, you know, the god awful Surrey situation. They should just need to figure out like, how do we make that a little bit better? And how do we let people just pick the AI model that they want? And I think that just becomes the strategy of like their inability. Now, as we've talked about before, like maybe in 10 years, we'll look back like this is the moment they gave away the store and no one really kind of recognized it.
Right.
Or, you know, as the other people would say, taking the other side, it's a bubble. They kind of sat it out. They're going to be the ones that come out the financial winner because they didn't spend all this money.
Right.
And they're going to, you know, either acquire a company or just have these great partnerships like they've had for Google forever. And they just sort of become like a toll booth and using AI. And so at this point, I think, you know, if you're Tim Cook, you're just like, well, let's ride it out. You know, it's like, this is the hand we have. Let's just ride it to the end. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's so interesting because again, if we went back, I don't know, 2 years, and we've talked about this, like if we were putting all the AI companies on a spectrum 2 years ago, you would have had Microsoft way out to the right. They've got their act together. They totally know what they're doing. We would have had Apple as far left as possible, don't know what they're doing, not spending money. And if you look at it right now, you would be like, I'm going to squint and I can't tell the difference between those two companies because neither one of them owns their model. Both of them are now going to a customer. You choose what model you want under the covers, of which they don't really own the best experience for either one of them. I mean, they feel kind of the same other than Microsoft's got a bunch of Copilot customers that are, you know, giving the money for, you know, kind of questionable ROI and stuff. But it's crazy how fast in 2 years, like these we always say like, oh, these giant behemoth companies can't move that fast, but they can. They do seem to be able to screw up pretty fast, though. Like you may not be able to catch up fast, but you can screw up pretty fast.
Well, there's some kind of management lesson in all of this. It's like, you know, they both tried to do something. You know, Apple basically announced it and failed, right? And then Microsoft, I won't say they failed, but like nobody uses Copilot and is like impressed. No one's like, oh, I'm not going to use anything else. So They both tried. They don't have good solutions. Now they're looking to partners doing it. Meanwhile, OpenAI and Anthropic are locked in a cage match. Like literally every day comes out. One of them announces a new feature. I mean, like almost every single day.
Yeah.
And so it's like you look at it like these other companies have no. And then Google, I don't even know what to make of Google. They sort of have stuff that's good, but then they just, it's they're kind of in the middle somewhere. Like, yeah, they can kind of, some weeks they ship, other weeks they just, nothing happens. So,
right.
So it's just a good example of the incumbents, even though they have the money and the customers, they don't always have the advantage. And I think that's playing out again.
Yeah. I mean, it does almost feel like, to a certain extent, like it'll be interesting to see if a year from now or so, if like Apple and Microsoft in particular, like go from being these very dominant companies that have survived multiple tech, kind of eras and so forth. They're one of the few that have done that sort of thing. I mean, it's very possible like a year and a half from now, they are literally just, fantastic distributions for both consumer and enterprise. And I don't mean that like
right. They're the AI shims for the consumer.
Yeah, they're like they become essentially like the Walmart of AI, right? They just sell everybody else's stuff, but they've got the best distribution in the world, kind of thing.
I think that's.
I mean, it's possible, right? Like they may figure it out, but like you could also paint a story where you're like, well, that looks like kind of where they're going because they no longer sort of own the core of their technology stack.
Well, it's just funny. I just think of Google Docs and Word, and it's like it is literally easier to author documents outside of those systems using your favorite agent tool, and then when you have to send it off, you just send it off in that format, right? But you never actually, and it's like I don't know, you just kind of stare at it like, why can I not author inside the tool even better than I can do outside the tool? And clearly they must know this. I mean, these are not dumb people. And it's like, it's obviously too complicated organizationally, technologically to make it work. And that's every time I stare at our show notes here today, I think to myself, the only way to interact with it is Gemini on the side. But Gemini on the side doesn't know about the Google Doc, but all the other ones do. And it's just the strangest phenomenon to watch.
Yeah, it is a crazy thing. And if you think about putting it in context, like I think what did they say now that Microsoft has this sort of lockup? Well, this new thing where Claude Cowork is sort of baked into Copilot, or at least it's one of the variants.
It's what, Copilot Cowork or Cowork Copilot, whatever.
Something like that.
For it, right?
It's Coco something. I think doesn't it go from like $30 if you're just buying like normal Microsoft 365 to like $90 a month? And you think about that, like in the context of what you're saying. So for $30 a month, for $60 a month, I get this awesome interactive like document, collaboration tool, and then for $30 a month, I get to keep the license to format it, and so other people can read it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much that's exactly true. That really is. It's like the formatting and file format, and then and the creation tools are separate. That's true. I love that.
So, all right. So let me put. So that sort of covers the big companies. Covers Apple. It covers NVIDIA. OpenAI has decided that they had a little too much fun on spring break. They've decided they're going to reel it back in. It feels like they're going through their period of like, okay, we're gonna be reeling, right? We went from like, we seemed like the smartest company in the world. We were putting out new stuff. They had ChatGPT. People were amazed by that. They come out with Sora. People are like, oh wow, this is really cool. It's very good. You've got companies like Disney who are like, sure, here's my intellectual property, put it in there.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, the ads aren't working out. We're going to pivot to enterprise. We're killing off Sora. Like it's got to be sort of like, what's the movie with the little kids on the island?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be all knives out over there. Between like, wait a minute, 2 months ago you hired me to do this thing. We were going to change the world, and now it's like, wait, we're now chasing Anthropic? That sort of feels like the mode they're in right now, which is like, oh, Anthropic proved that they know how to monetize stuff. And it's almost like it's like OpenAI forgot that they're like, oh yeah, no, we also have 900 million people that still use the thing like every day and every month.
Well, I think it's even funny. I think you're referencing Lord of the Rings there, or not Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
Right?
Lord of the Flies, yeah.
Lord of the Rings, a different thing. Lord of the Flies. And I just think to myself, like, continuing that analogy was like, not only are they losing, but like the people that they first got to the island with, they're like, you're too weak. You can't survive here. They sent them away. And now they've come, and that's basically being Anthropic. They've come back stronger, right? And they've come back in some ways better. So I think one thing I haven't seen talked about as much, and I'm curious, is like, most of the executives that got a lot of the, press when they came over all came from like an advertising, Facebook kind of background. And I think at that point that was pretty clear that I think they were like, we're going to build like a Google, Facebook advertising business, right? And what I think is interesting now, it's like, it's pretty clear, at least the money in the near term is in the enterprise, right? As we've been talking about. And so I'm kind of wonder, back to your analogy there of Knives Out, it's like, and Sam Altman, not afraid to change his mind as well. It's like, I just wonder if they look around, like, do we even have the right team involved to build these kinds of things? Like, we're not really, because they've also shut down. The other thing that we didn't mention was they shut down this commerce thing. They had this commerce API. You were going to somehow, like, Walmart was going to like bill you or something. And everyone sort of said that's not going to work either. So it's almost like that whole company was like 6 months. It's to your point about how things change. It's like 6 months ago, consumer-based advertising was going to save all. Then they wake up, enterprise code agent kind of thing is what you need. And it's like, do you even have the people to build this? Meanwhile, I think Anthropic, we give them credit, but I think they've just sort of like, I think they just stumbled into it as well. I think they're sort of like, because they say Claude Code was one person, right? Like they were just kind of one project. And it's like, I think that, and I think so I'm really interested. I think your Knives Out question is like, I wonder if we'll start to see some people decide that they've time to spend more time with their families and they need to go on vacation as they roll out and figure out that this isn't what I really wanted to do, nor is this something I'm necessarily good at.
Well, and I think your point of like, do they have the right people is probably the exact answer. Because if you think about it from a big picture perspective, you're like, okay, so you built this consumer, you built this consumer app. It grew faster than any other consumer app, and so you go, okay, how do I monetize that? Because you've got just a ton of capital that you need to stop burning through and so forth. And if you listen to anybody, even the people, like again, we point to Ben Thompson, but there's lots of people, but like he was one of the ones who was like, okay, number one, that's the only viable consumer model because it lets you play both sides of the market and helps you grow. But number two, he was like, you need to know that the first couple of iterations are going to stink, but that's okay. You just need to stick with it, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if they just don't have people right now that, I mean, it almost feels like they went out and they hired a bunch of Facebook people because they were like, okay, we're going to go find ad people. We can't hire the ad people from Google because they're the only good place at ads. It's almost like they needed a certain number of Microsoft people to come over because the Microsoft people are better than anybody at being like, okay, we missed on the first try, but we're going to keep trying on try two. Oh, we missed on the second try. Okay, we're going to keep trying. I'm going to build up some calluses. I'm going to fall down. I'm going to skin my knee. But by the fourth time, we will have figured out a way to be tough enough to stay in this market and to keep plowing along and keep learning stuff. And it almost feels like because the culture around AI is everything has to go so fast. Every month, if you're not shipping the new thing and you haven't figured it out, like you failed, and it feels like that a little bit with OpenAI. It's like Sam Altman is a deal maker. He's not a product builder. Everybody else on that team, the Greg Brockmans of the world, they're data scientists. They're not business people. But it does feel like they somehow just don't have the right mindset or the right people to be like, this is the toughness of this business we have to stay in. Like winning ads is not going to be easy against Google. They've figured out how to get past the first hump. So I don't know.
I think the thing we should watch for everyone who wants to play along at home, I think her name is Fiji Simio.
Yeah.
She's the one that left Instacart as the CEO. And basically she was credited with like building a great advertising business within Instacart. So she is currently the CEO of applications. So she was explicitly brought in to be like, you got to build the apps on top of this great technology. And then you got to go sell them and got to make tons of money. So the question is, I think of, 6-8 months ago, she probably is an ideal background building an advertising business. Today, building, an enterprise business, I don't know. So we'll see, not that, listen, people can change, people can do other stuff, smart people can do it. But I'm saying today, like that's the person to watch. If she suddenly has to just spend time with her family and has had a great run, you're going to know that's a good tell that things have changed inside of OpenAI. So watch that person's LinkedIn, if you will.
Yeah. And again, on the spectrum of where were you a year ago? Where were you 6 months ago? Boy, OpenAI is, man, Yeah, I mean they're in Apple range at this point of like you guys really screwed that up. How did you screw that up? But
How did you mess that up?
Good news is Sam keeps finding ways for people to keep giving him money. Although you're starting to hear the stories about like they're having to go look for more expensive money and more promises for things. Because
this is it's inevitable. The IPO has to be on the way. There just is not enough people to fund this. You just need to go out where like. Yeah. Every hedge fund, every investor,
pension fund,
consumer, everybody can be like, you know what? I need a little piece of that because I want to put it in my portfolio. And that's how you can raise, tons of money. You just can't go to like 10 people or 100 people and do this. It's coming one way or the other, but maybe he doesn't want to do it. But one way or the other, that's where the money is. So I say go public, OpenAI. That'll make great podcasting week for us. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There was a couple of other things I thought were sort of interesting. The CEO of Supermicro got arrested and indicted for he's been smuggling a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs into China.
Yeah,
probably not the smartest thing. It
seems bad.
It was funny. Somebody on LinkedIn, actually I apologize, I forget his name. He was like, "Hey, can you guys make an official comment on the podcast?" I was like, "Yeah, don't do stuff to get yourself put in jail."
Seems wrong. Don't do that.
Smuggling's been going on for hundreds of years. Like this isn't anything new. But
it sounds like it's just a very complicated way to make a lot of money too. It feels like if you're gonna commit crimes now, there's a lot better crimes to commit than like we got to physically get all these things into China. People are going to be watching that. I wouldn't do that. I'd commit better crimes. That's my message.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of good insider trading things out there. Gosh,
I was going to say, listen, there's a whole we won't touch on it today, but there's a whole prediction market world where you can make tons of money, and it's like it's questionable like what actually happens, but nothing physical actually changes. It's just people get rich.
That's right. The last thing I put on here, we should obviously touch on OpenClaw and QClaw and all the things. What I did was I found a good newsletter, comes out like once a day. It's MyClaw newsletter.
Oh, okay.
I think it's run by the guys that run like myclaw.ai, which is basically like a OpenClaw as a service.
Okay.
They spin up something up in the cloud so you don't have to worry about like killing your Mac. Good newsletter, comes out every day. It's usually got 4 or 5 articles. It's too hard to keep up with like all the changes because like some of them are super minute, like they changed the way they do memory, and other days it'll be like they integrated Telegram or something along those lines. So it feels to me like the OpenClaw community is still growing really fast. People are still interested, but it also feels like both OpenAI and in particular Claude is just like, oh, cool, you committed a feature? Okay, we're going to put that into Claude code.
For sure. The public roadmaps for these companies are definitely OpenClaw, without a doubt. Well, I just signed up. I haven't seen this one before, so I'm signed up.
So good.
I'm looking for
a newsletter. So there's a link in the show notes. You can definitely dig into it. I also found, because I was looking around for just some demonstrations and stuff, there is the Los Angeles OpenClaw meeting, which again, you don't have to live in Los Angeles, but these guys did a really nice job of, they show about 10 different demos. They're all about 6 or 7 minutes of stuff that people have built. So there's a link in the show notes for all of their demonstrations. Might give you an idea of stuff to go dig into if you want to get in the Claw world, the OpenClaw world, or the 10,000 variants of Claw that are out there. Nemo Claw, maybe you can dig into that as well. So, all right, man, I think we've covered a lot of stuff. We covered all the big hitters. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that are worth going through. I think that's all the big ones. There's lots of stuff in the show notes. Folks will put lots of links in there for you. Any last thoughts, man? How would you rate? Maybe we should do this every month. How would you rate March as a month? What would you give it as a grade in terms of excitingness, in terms of disasters, in terms of
I think we've seen a lot. I think I'd be like B plus kind of. I think a lot of new features have come out of Claude Code and as well as OpenAI and others. So I like that. And I think we've seen, I do like this OpenAI. They're obviously, if you will, retrenching. So I think very good month. And I expect the summertime, every time we think it's going to slow down, it gets kind of crazy. So I'm expecting kind of a crazy summer. I think we're going to see, I don't know what's going to happen. I think we can see some major new features or, trends, but I definitely think we're going to see some palace intrigue. I think people will be moving one, I don't know who, I don't know when. Maybe check out the prediction markets for that, but
that's right.
Something's going to be happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. It feels like it's like Thanksgiving. Anytime we want to take a break, these guys got to go do something good, bad, or indifferent. So we'll do our best to cover it. We'll do our best to cover it kind of every week and every month. So Brandon, as always, thank you for jumping on with your insights and your takes, and hopefully your bracket continues to be 100% for the next 2 weeks, and you win all the money. So, all right, folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for giving us some feedback on the show and the new format. And last thing, we've been doing some experimentation with some of the editing tools. I know there's been a little bit of scratchiness and some oddities. I'm going to get those republished. So apologize if you heard some, weird pauses or some echo or static in the background. We'll get those cleaned up, and we'll make that better going forward. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Check us out online at reasoning.show for all things reasoning. And leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show.